Mr Tharman Shanmugaratnam, welcome to the show!
We have to address the elephant in the room.
I think that's really out of turn. The fact is, Low Tia Kiang knew it, Pritam knows it.
We're gonna get the truth from you,
It's the episode you've all been waiting for. This is your daily Ketchup. Dan, are you part of our race to 100k by the end of the year?
No.
Then you're part of this 50%. Please go down and subscribe, and we love you. Get us to 100k. Back to the episode. Good afternoon, Singapore! We got a very friendly man here with us today, and he is none other than Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam. Welcome to the show!
Welcome to the show!
Cheers!
Cheers.
Yeah, you know the wedding person that will do
Yeah.
Yeah, your energy is
Well, the thing is, some of them don't realize you got to do it in one breath.
Correct.
It doesn't make sense to take another breath and carry on.
Awkward. The moment over.
Okay, so I mean, I've done a considerable amount of research on you in my preparation for this. Right. So something very interesting that I found is that you like to play sports every day. Something that one of your ex-colleagues, Minister Josephine Teo, used to play basketball. Do you think you'll beat her in a one-on-one match of basketball?
I'll lose to her for sure.
No way, really? So basketball's not a sport, okay.
I played 7 sports. 4 very competitively. 1 for combined schools and eventually in the Premier League as well.
Premier League?
Of what?
Hockey.
Oh,
Wow.
So,
Hockey.
no, it's serious.
Okay.
And Singapore used to be very good at hockey, by the way.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but then now don't have you, that's why. Okay, so something that you've been doing nowadays that people might know of is that you're running for president. So tell us why.
Well, it's also about running.
Oh,
Okay.
I don't like. Anyway, that's why I'm not doing that. So why are you doing it?
Actually, it was a very careful process of thinking through, look, did this make sense for me, and can I do Singapore good in this role? I had to think very hard about it. It just goes back a long way for me. All my life, I've been interested in doing better for society. Part of the context is that I was never someone who paid much attention to my studies. In school, I had difficulty studying because I just couldn't concentrate.
Same.
I just couldn't concentrate. I literally
We all
couldn't
cut from the
concentrate.
same cloth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even when I went to university, I found it very hard to pay attention to lectures. But I did my own stuff. I did my own study. I formed my own study groups. And I was a student activist, constantly thinking about how to raise awareness amongst others, very reform-minded, a little more radical at that time, but in a very serious way.
So have you gone for protests?
I wasn't particularly interested in being at the front of the show and being the most exciting part of it on the streets and so on. I was someone who did a lot of the thinking, the talking, the persuading, the conscientization.
Right.
So I wasn't in demonstrations, but I was very serious about wanting to understand society, understand whether there were alternatives that would give ordinary people a better deal. It was a very important part of my life. I also met my wife at the same time because she was involved in the same circles. So sports and then student activism through my 20s and continuing as a young adult to be oriented very much that way shaped a lot of my thinking. I enjoyed my previous job.
Yeah.
I was very active, shifting the overall balance of policies to favor ordinary folk. But what was also very important was helping people individually and on the ground, mobilizing volunteers, mobilizing peer circles. A lot of it is behind the scenes in our policy thinking and policy formulation. The international roles I spent a lot of time on, I could have carried on.
Yeah.
I was very active. I was not so present publicly because I was deliberately wanting to provide full space to the 4G leaders to take charge and be the ones who led things in public. But I was very active behind the scenes. I could have carried on. But I just felt at this point in time, we need a president who's going to be able to play that role in a much more challenging set of circumstances, both domestically as well as internationally especially. And I decided I should step forward.
So how do you think running for president will help you do that better as compared to your previous role as Deputy Prime Minister?
So my previous roles, education, finance, DPM, SM and so on, was a policy-making role. So I will no longer be able to do the policy making as a president. That's very clear. But I'm going to dedicate a lot of time to supporting ground-up initiatives to help every disadvantaged group. And it's not about charity, it's not about just being compassionate. It's actually about developing people, developing young kids who start off with a disadvantage. It takes time. Befriending someone who's a little bit lost, even midlife. You can't solve it by just giving someone a hamper. You've got to get to know them. You've got to get volunteers involved with them. So I feel that's extremely important. That dimension of my life, which is not new, it's been what I've been doing in Jurong for a long time, carries on, but I'm now going to be looking at it much more actively nationally. The President has full leeway to support ground-up initiatives, support civil society, support all these voluntary groups.
So how do you think in general you performed at last night's debate? Forum, sorry.
I never really rate myself. I say what comes through my mind. On most issues, of course, I have thought about these issues for a long time. They're not new to me.
But you stressed a lot. First, like the first question, then your mic gonna mute.
One of the most famous and popular Malaysian crimes of all time that until today people are still talking about it, and I still feel in my dreams when I hear her name, Mazna Ismail. But most people would know her by the name Muna Fendi. This story was told far and wide, and based on all the rumors, we were scared shitless as kids to say her name. Mona Fendi. Someone told me not to talk about this story.
So you guys just watched some clips from our second episode of Gruesome Grub. Was there really a ghost on set? Well, you just had to watch and find out lah. The episode's already live on The Grubbies, and while you're there, just like, share and subscribe. And now, back to the episode.
But you stressed a lot. First, like the first question, then your mic gonna mute.
No,
Your time management.
it was actually... For that first one. On my last two words, the mic faded, but you could still hear me.
Yeah, it's true.
And I was ending just there. For my subsequent questions, I did okay. I was
You
either,
came back 7 seconds one time.
no, either that or I was just right on the dot.
Was there anything you feel like you wish you did differently or did better? I mean, there are impressions of all the different candidates, right? And I'm gonna tell you yours lah. I feel like you feel like the safe candidate, right? Is there anything you wish you could have demonstrated on the forum last night that you feel like maybe your personality didn't shine in that regard?
I haven't reflected in detail about it, but I think seriously about everything that's put to me. So I'm very rarely frivolous, and I usually speak with some knowledge of what I'm talking about.
So speaking of never being frivolous, how did you come up with the pineapple logo?
Yeah, I would like to know the brainstorm.
Oh, that's a very serious choice. I mean,
the meeting. And what were the rejected
absolutely.
ones?
In detail, please, in
The
detail.
apple, nah.
there were several rejected ones.
They were not all fruits,
But
right?
no, in fact, fruits came very late in the day. There were types of flowers.
Don't tell me it's orchid.
It's a bamboo orchid.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
And the bamboo orchid is different from a normal orchid, and it grows in the wild. It happens to grow quite well in Jurong as well.
Okay.
It grows easily in our climate. And we went through quite detailed design work on the bamboo orchid. Then we switched to different types of birds.
Then the graphic designer.
And then we were actually running out of time.
Oh, okay.
And then I started looking at fruit.
Like Pinterest.
And I must say that compared to all the other concepts where we, I had a good group of people who were discussing this, young and old, and we would deliberate and never quite agree on any of the other concepts, 40-60 or 20-80. On the pineapple, when I suggested it, within 10 seconds, everyone agreed.
Wow.
Everyone.
No, we left it too. But when I saw the tree, right, I was like, that's not yours. Yours is the hen one or something. There's something a bit more serious. It's not the pineapple.
Speaking of your wife, what is the abridged version of your love story? How do you guys...
We met in London. We were part of the same circle of friends.
Put this together.
We didn't fall in love suddenly or in any particular moment. We just got to know each other better and better and better. And we just eventually realized that we would spend the rest of our lives together.
No, but who first?
Asking the real question.
And how you chase?
We didn't chase each other either. It was just obvious that we were very good friends. I feel that it was all
You
pretty
stand by,
equal all along.
We're gonna get the truth from you,
She thinks that she liked me before I liked her.
Oh! Okay.
And she has actually said so in one of these interviews recently.
Right.
But I'm not someone who shows my emotions very overtly. So I think it was pretty equal.
Yeah, no one really asked like, do you want to be my girlfriend? You just
Actually, my parents also didn't.
Yes,
When I asked them
that's
this question, they
yes.
also didn't.
Right.
They just decided to buy a house one day.
Interesting.
And then you gotta get married out of the way.
Right.
Yeah.
It was so easy back then.
Yeah.
Well, for our grandparents, it
time.
was very often arranged.
Simple times.
Yeah.
Can I ask an out of turn question?
Sure.
I think.
I think that's really out of turn.
That's very good. I think many people are asking the question when there was a fourth generation renewal for the party, right? And people are saying Tharman for PM, and that didn't happen for whatever reason. I think you come out to say that was not a role that you wanted as well.
Right.
And then now for presidency, what? Where do you think that differs for you? That's part one of the question.
Right.
And part two of the question would then be, did the party tell you to run?
No. So on part one, there are two reasons. First, I knew myself. Going back to my sports days, I was never the striker. It just wasn't my personality. I felt that we had a very good PM, and I saw no reason why he needed to rush stepping down. That was my view, actually. Secondly, I saw we had in our team young people who are also very good and who could be groomed up. I would not have wanted to be a seat warmer in between two generations. A president has a different role. A president's not a striker either.
Quite lah.
No, president's not a striker
Captain.
either.
The
President's not, on some issues, the president is the goalkeeper when it comes to reserves.
That's true, that's true.
Right, but that's a wrong metaphor because actually the president's not part of the same team.
Yeah.
Right? I like supporting activity on the ground. Secondly, there's the international dimension that's very important because I've been very active in my previous roles in flying the Singapore flag internationally. I have international standing in a range of fields, and I think that's very useful for the presidency to have. Thirdly, all my experience in policy making on everything to do with reserves, as well as the other issues to do with the public sector, is extremely useful. Extremely useful. I won't be the finance minister, but I know everything inside out about reserves.
Right.
So there's no inconsistency at all between my not feeling that I was the right person for PM,
Right.
and feeling that, particularly at this point in time, I can serve Singapore best at present. I believe that very deeply.
Right. And so the party didn't be like,
They didn't
"Yo,
push me to do it.
you wanna?
No, they didn't push. Actually, the people who spoke to me about it most were from outside government for
Right.
some
Right.
time. For some
Yeah,
time.
I think there was a social
The same
media
people
campaign.
who wanted me to be PM
Yeah.
subsequently switched over and said, "Look, can you please consider
The next
becoming
best option.
president?"
When you tendered your resignation, did Mr. Lee go like, don't want lah? No, because a lot of people are commenting that your talents will be wasted in the role of president, which a lot of people view to be largely ceremonial and as a
Right.
sort of figurehead. So maybe you could expand a bit about what you think would be the impact of the presidential role.
Right. So ceremonial is just a description of the traditional roles of the president, which are both domestic and international. How you go about that role determines whether it is just artifice and ceremony or whether you're adding substance. I intend to add substance. The reason is because times are changing. The role has to evolve. And the thing that I feel very strongly about is there are too many of our kids who just grow up feeling they're nobodies. There's a quiet way in which some people just feel they're not so valued. They go to school, they're nobody. They come out, they're nobody. But they want to be somebody. And everyone can be somebody in Singapore. You've got to help them discover that strength in themselves when they're young. It may not be what they eventually do or specialize in, but just discover a strength in yourself. It may be hip hop. It may be that you never knew you could play football as a girl, but when we put you to it and when we train you up, you become really good. And it just gives people confidence. Gives people confidence. And I feel giving confidence to those who've started off from behind is extremely important. So that's one big area. Second, everything to do with climate change. It involves government policy, carbon taxes, a whole plethora of policies are involved. But ground-up initiative is extremely important. it helps people rethink how we live our lives. Fast fashion, types of food we eat, how much waste, lots of changes. And that's how a nation eventually adapts to a changing world. We've got to all change our behavior. And I'm just giving you examples of the types of ground-up initiative that are not just about government policy, but importantly, it's also about a broader change in culture. I think we need to deepen that culture of respect for people from all backgrounds, not based on how well they were doing academically, not based on those who in fact became successful, but just deepen that respect for everyone, for the skill they bring, for the jobs they do, and for the heart they're putting in to what they do.
On a side note, right, you've spoken quite a bit about Jurong also, which you seem to love. And recently on our podcast, we actually did a episode where we ranked neighborhoods in Singapore. So out of that, Jurong actually ranked quite low, like around same as like Choa Chu Kang.
Well, obviously a very poor survey and a very poor set of assessment criteria.
If you could sell us on Jurong, right, what would you say would make Jurong the best, should be the best A tier, S tier neighborhood in Singapore?
Right. Actually,
currently it's Siglap. So
no,
Jurong must
the
beat
trouble
Siglap.
is people apply the Siglap and East prism of what matters to Jurong.
Oh.
It doesn't matter in Jurong, all this stuff. Right? It doesn't matter in Jurong.
Nothing matters
I
in
tell you, the
Jurong.
moment you enter Taman Jurong, okay, you turn from Boon Lay Way into Yuan Ching Road, there's a set of casuarina trees. It's
So, like, very wild,
No, it's just immediately calm. It's peaceful.
Right.
There's a calm vibe.
It's true. People walk slower in the West. I get annoyed.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You just keep saying, excuse me.
Yeah, right. No, there's just a calm vibe and there's a humble vibe about it, right?
Right. They never start the West Side Chan.
It's in fact a very interesting neighborhood as well. And of course now we've got Jurong Lake Gardens, which is going to be such a wonderful place for everyone. But it's just an interesting neighborhood. The food is actually much better than people think. I mean, Taman Jurong Hawker Centre, which I never stop talking about, is actually very good. They're just very good stalls. And the prices are also, for some reason, slightly cheaper than some other places. So it's an interesting place. Not everyone needs to be in the most hip and exciting part of town, because you can always visit that when you want. You
But
can
it's so
visit
far.
that.
It's like
It's
so
not far at all. It's not far at all. So I mean, that's the point.
Yeah.
People want diversity in their lives. Doesn't mean that you stay in the place where you want to be on Saturday night.
Yeah.
In fact, you may not want to stay in the place where you
That's
want
why
to
I
be
say
on
about
Saturday
Punggol.
night.
Exactly what I say.
Good point.
Yeah, right.
Now, by the way,
okay, anyway.
I'm slightly
to
more
the
convinced on
proper things.
Jurong now, by the way.
yeah. No, the point is you can't apply the same ranking criteria to every neighborhood.
That's why people are angry in that comment section.
Yeah,
They
many
upset a
people
lot of people.
disagree with us. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, back to the more proper things.
Serious.
So you've also mentioned as part of your campaign that voters should assess each candidate on what they have contributed to society, but you've talked little about actually what you've done in all your years in service as well. So what were maybe some notable policies that you had worked on that people might not be aware of?
Okay. So, I mean, my whole purpose in entering politics and entering government was, first, I entered politics because I wanted to be on the ground, but my job was that of a technocrat. I became the managing director of the MAS, right? That was my last position. I was lucky that I was able to serve my first long stint as a minister in education for 5 years. In fact, before that, when I was in the civil service, I was given a choice to go to any ministry I wanted to. Lim Cheong Wan called me up because they were asking me to join the admin service. This was in fact after my OSA case.
Right.
And it was a sure sign of the way the system actually viewed me within the civil service, that after the OSA case, some months after, they asked me, would you like to join the admin service?
Right.
My integrity was never in question. And he gave me a full choice. And I said, I'd like to be in education. I'd spent my entire career in the MAS, the central bank, as a chief economist, looking at a whole set of economic and financial issues. But I wanted to be in the Ministry of Education. And that's actually when a reform process started, freeing up the system, which we started with what I would view as quite a rigid streaming system. Streaming early in primary school and then all the way through secondary school. plus ranking schools based on academic performance. And I started dismantling that. I got rid of primary school streaming, did it in 2 steps. First combining what we called EM1 and EM2, and then getting rid of EM3 and doing away with the whole system. Started actually in secondary school, between express stream, normal academic and normal technical, creating movement between them. And I told the schools to experiment, see how well it is being done, gives you a confidence, gives the teachers confidence, and then you move boldly. So for instance, we now have subject-based banding in secondary schools, and we don't have streaming anymore, right? It started actually in my time. Dunman Secondary School, I remember this, decided from Sec 1, all their normal academic students will take mathematics at express stream level.
Wow.
They supported the students, let's try it. And when they got to Sec 4 and took their express stream maths O-levels, 40% of that group had distinctions,
Wow.
right? So it just showed that putting people within a stream where they think they're weak in everything limits them. In fact, they may be strong in something and weak in something else. And very few people are weak in everything, and very few people are actually strong in everything. So the streaming system was too rigid. And we are now we've moved to a more fluid system, but never assuming that your potential is fixed at any point in time.
Right.
And that was something I believed in from my conversations with the teachers and the principals. I also believed in it from my own experience in life.
It's so interesting because like you started off like didn't even like studying, then somehow you become education minister, and then after
Right.
it kind of came full circle because of your
But I
experience.
never told people when I was an education minister about that fact, by the way. I never did. I can talk about it now, but I just felt it would demoralize the principals and teachers. I never wanted to say that. It's a set of changes which I feel are very important. Secondly, just opening up new pathways. For people who are very good at sports, very good at arts, very good at science and maths, setting up specialized schools, and eventually science and technology. I established Northlight and Assumption Pathway.
Wow. Okay.
It's also a different pathway, right?
Yeah.
First Northlight, and then because I realized it was too far for students in the West to get there, and they weren't turning up for school or they were coming late, we set up Assumption Pathway as well in the West. And those two are also an alternative way in which people can advance. They can progress after failing their PSLE, but it has to be a very different system. So having a more flexible and broader system of meritocracy is something I believe deeply in. And there are, of course, many other changes I'm not talking about, but it has then cascaded. So I feel that educational policy is still at the core of what Singapore is about, both socially and economically. I think we've made major moves. Once I moved into finance and was very involved in reforming our other policies, it was all consistent. So for instance, we introduced workfare, which has subsequently been enhanced significantly, introduced the progressive wage model, introduced silver support for the older folk who've had lives of low pay and now don't have enough in retirement. It's a whole set of changes, but if you sum it all up, it was a tilt. It was a tilt in the broad set of educational, social, and economic policies to help provide more support for those who start with less and provide more help even in old age for those who, for whatever reasons, have ended up with less. It's a tilt towards the low-income group and to some extent the middle-income group. And that tilt is something I believed in for a long time, and I played a very active role in shaping policies.
Okay, so I guess we have to address the elephant in the room, right? I think when you announce your presidential candidate, I think Singapore, by and large, are really excited that you did. But I feel like right now the voting pool is looking at voting for other people as a safe way to show unhappiness to the ruling party to a certain extent, right? To give them a little FU.
So there's some element of political motivation, I think, for some in the electorate, and certainly amongst the candidates. It's not surprising to me. Not everyone has understood that the presidency is not a political contest. It's a contest between individuals who have to serve in a capacity that is well above politics. Even to say that I've never been a member of a political party, you have been, therefore you're not suitable, is a political argument. It's a political argument and an opportunistic one. We should just present what we are bringing to the table, how we are going to serve Singaporeans, talk about our own track records, have people examine what we've done over time, how we have stood our ground or not stood our ground over time. And my life is an open book. That's what the contest should be about. So we lose sight of it with all these abstract arguments about whether you're a member of a political party, whether you've been a finance minister before, etc. These are just politically opportunistic arguments. I'm still running on my track record. Being in politics in the last 22 years is a huge positive, because I would not otherwise have been so experienced on the ground in getting people to uplift themselves, helping them through their problems, and just bonding people. I wouldn't have had all that policy experience. It was all there because I was in politics. Is it a negative? No, it's a positive. Now, it would be a negative if I was someone who by nature was politically partisan, or if I'm someone who by nature is a yes man. But everyone knows I've just never been a yes man. The fact is, the opposition has always known it, and that's why Paul Tambaya said I should be a PM for an opposition alliance, and he's now trying to retract from it. Okay, Loh Tia Kiang knew it. Even Pritam knows it. I'm someone who has views of my own, has convictions of my own. Even when I made that speech about Jamus Lim and Monopoly of Compassion, I gave him credit, and said I respect where he's coming from intellectually and morally. What people don't realize, however, is before a policy comes to Parliament, when it's being deliberated on in government and we are working it out, they don't realize how much disagreement there is.
Right.
And
okay, so who always argue with you?
And that's been the case. It goes all the way back to Lee Kuan Yew's time.
Right.
It's not as if we all come and read a paper and says, yes, let's agree. We have extensive debate. And that's actually a strength of the system, that people with individual viewpoints sort out those viewpoints and find a consensus. And the consensus today is different from 5 years ago, different from 10 years ago. We've shifted on many issues.
Right.
I've been really privileged to be part of that debate. People know where I come from usually because they know my leanings. We sometimes even make jokes about it because everyone knows which way I lean.
So this part is for Mr. Tharman, okay? My next...
No, I mean, on any issue, basically, well, none of us are sort of fixed ideologically.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have our leanings,
Yeah.
right? And it's not as if that debate is something where, okay, let's spend 1 hour debating it and then we'll agree and that's it.
Right.
If we don't come to an agreement, we just carry on. It becomes 2 hours. We can go late into the
Right.
evening. And if we still can't agree, we come back 1 or 2 weeks later. So we are very serious about airing differences of views and sorting it out, even if it's not a full consensus. Some consensus on, okay, we'll move with this position first. And sometimes knowing that we will save some further moves for later.
They need to film this behind the scenes.
No, yeah. I mean, if PFP you're here, right? Do some of it in Parliament lah.
So like I think it's usually broadcasted on YouTube nowadays, right? Gov.sg. But I think not enough Singaporeans tune in to
That's
like
probably
the
true.
parliamentary.
Oh, that's probably
No,
true.
most of it is boring. I tried.
Yeah, people wait
Most
for like
of
the
it is
TikTok,
boring.
and it's
Yeah.
always the most sensational like moments
Right.
that get clipped out.
I have a very busted question. This one came from my Instagram one.
Okay.
So on our episode of this series with presidential candidate Tan, he claimed that he and his wife up on the wall, the picture is the nicest of all three presidential candidates. Right. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I would really rather not comment on these things.
Yeah lah, John.
Yeah lah. You're telling me to ask.
That was the best response.
Whichever way I answer it, it will not be good.
He's been trying very hard to psych himself up
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
ready to
yeah.
ask this question.
You got more hard ones or not?
So I think as a closing, right, maybe you can like pitch yourself a bit, right? What do you think is something that you can offer to Singapore that the other candidates cannot?
I felt they all brought something, They all had interesting life stories. Some had very distinct strengths. Ng Kok Song was an investment manager, very distinct strengths. They all bring something. Tan Ke Lian grew NTUC income. So I respect them. The difference with me, and it's really been just my privilege to have served in so many ways in different areas, unlike them, you see. I'm the only one who's really served on the ground for a long time and actually made changes on the ground and changed people's lives. That's the first thing. I've had a much broader international leadership role than any of them, and I'm held in high regard internationally. But even on reserves, I'm actually the one who has the deep and broad knowledge on reserves. Because the knowledge of reserves that are needed for the presidency are not to do with investment management. The president does not get involved at all in international management. The knowledge of reserves has to do with the use of reserves by the government, which is an MOF and government matter. How do you use your investment income that you get from reserves? How do you use the reserves in a major crisis when you have to draw on it, like we've done twice so far? Even though I was chairing the Investment Strategies Committee, I'll say that part was not relevant. The part that's relevant is the MOF, DPM, SM part. I understand the whole system of reserves inside out. And that's relevant. So on all three counts, my ground experience, my international standing and experience, and my knowledge of what really matters on reserves, I'm distinctive. It's actually my whole life, you know. From my youngest days until now, what's been my motivation? It's just been to serve Singaporeans. When I say serve Singaporeans, I mean especially those who have less and less chances in life. I've never been particularly interested in party politics. Everyone knows that. I've never been actively involved in party politics, but I served in government and it was my privilege to serve in government, and my purpose was to reform policies and to serve on the ground to help Singaporeans. It's just been about Singaporeans all along. And that's it.
Okay, so with that, we've come to the end of our 4-part presidential series, and thank you very much, Mr. Tharman, for joining us today.
Tomorrow we'll be releasing a summary episode of our thoughts on all the presidential candidates so far. So
like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Happy voting.